you are not getting the results you want because you aren't learning what you need to learn.
I distinctly remember doing this, and looking back, it's so stupid.
If you're throwing plugins on and you don't know why, that's a problem.
I found a video of Graham from the Recording Revolution.
Gain staging is a hot topic right now. The painful part is you spend whatever you value the least. And most people value time the least.
These are 6 mistakes that beginner mixers make that will keep their music sounding amateur. If it's your first time here, welcome to the Alex and Andrew podcast. We're really excited to dive into this one. Let's begin. Andrew, what is the number one mistake that a beginner mixer will make?
Beginner mistake number one is adding plugins just for the sake of adding them. If you're throwing plugins on and you don't know why, that's a problem. And so one way I like to avoid having this happen in my sessions is I spend time learning plugins. I open a session, just take time learning specific plugins. I pick my favorites, and then I always go back to those. So when I need a compressor, I know what compressor I like or the different styles of compressors I like for the different sounds. That's one way I like to avoid that specifically.
That's so true. Just like one thing I can do, and I use Pro Tools, for example, but it doesn't matter which DAW. I can have my plugin selections window, and then I can have I can put my favorites or my go-tos like at the top of it. And so I get the ones that I know the best, and I have them there ready to go so that I just know which ones to grab and which ones I know really well. And I know when I'm grabbing each of those, I know what purpose they're for, and I know which purpose I'm trying to fulfill when I grab for one. So it's always just keeping in mind, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
I love that. I absolutely love that. One thing that I teach my students a lot is when you add a plugin on a track, I need you to say out loud why you're doing it.
That's so good.
Actually say it in real words out loud, not just in your head, but out loud, because if you can't articulate it, you don't understand it, and you can't throw it on the track. Why am I adding this compressor? I need to tame the peaks on the transients a little bit, so that way I'm getting a little bit more control over the sound. All right, add a compressor and do that specific thing with that compressor. That's one of the best ways I've found to actually get better mixes and not have just a jumble of plugins all over your sessions.
Dude, and I love how you give that example, because you said the compressor to tame. This sound is all over the place. I need to tame the transients. I think a lot of people use like the scapegoat of the word, maybe like color or character. I know that I do, but it's kind of like that, like je ne sais quoi type of thing, right?
Yes.
But but it has to be like a character that you understand, and in that case, like, you could say, I am adding this saturation plugin to add some analog kind of distorted character to this in order to make it stand out, you know? But I think if you just stop at character, it's like, okay, character for what? Is it to make it stand out? Is it to smooth out the transients? Because like, it's so important just to define those things. It's like, it's such a good point. I love that. The why. Like, why are you adding a plugin?
Yep. And eventually you'll get to the point where you can actually just implement it and start implementing it immediately and not actually have to say that out loud. But when you're starting out, and especially like if you're having this issue, just start saying it out loud. It'll eventually become second nature, and then you'll be able to grab those things with essentially muscle memory. That's one I love doing that.
And that's kind of where you get into the flow state. Like, just like if you're jamming guitar or jamming piano and you look at the time and it's been 2 hours and you don't even know where you went for that time, you get to a point with mixing where it's the same and you're just in flow state and you're grabbing plugins, but it's not because you're just grabbing them for the sake of just grabbing them and not knowing what you're doing. You're in a flow state where it's second nature and you know what to grab to get to that next little decision made in your mix. So that's a huge one. Just adding plugins for the sake of adding them. That is the mistake, but rather knowing why you're adding every single plugin in the chain, that's going to make the difference and get the music not sounding amateur, but getting to sound more professional because you're making professional decisions.
Yes, professional comes from intentional, being intentional. If you want professional mixes, you need to have intention. Be intentional with your mixes.
That's amazing, Andrew. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, I need that on a t-shirt. What's number 2, Alex?
Number 2, mistake beginner mixers make that keep their music sounding amateur is not listening to music in the same environment they mix in. And just to clarify what that means, it's getting to know your mixing environment and understanding what your room sounds like, what your headphones sounds like, what your monitors sound like, so that you can get better translating mixes out there in the real world. What do you think, Andrew?
No, I completely agree. One thing I tell people all the time, learn a pair of headphones. And if the headphones that you learned are a pair of Apple AirPods, you're listening to music all the time in those, then just mix in them. Like, just mix in them until you're comfortable moving on. Get a good pair of headphones and listen to music all the time on those. I promise you that if you take my headphones right now, that you have no idea what a good mix sounds like on them, and then you try to mix something on there, it's not going to sound better just because you have a better pair of headphones. You need to know what they sound like. Now, getting a good pair of headphones and learning what they sound like is way better than mixing on an Apple AirPods. I will say there. But get good at knowing what your headphones sound like, and the same thing for studio monitors. And if you have moved studios, you need to do the same thing with your room, because your room also adds an element of sound to it. I just moved my studio recently, had the same issue where I had to relearn everything. So I just sat, grabbed a book, was listening to music in my studio, had some coffee, and spent a few hours in here really learning how things sound in my room.
It's so key. It's a matter of, before you even start working, I mean, this is my first week in my new studio space as well, and it sounded totally different in here. So there were a couple things I did. I used some software to calibrate my speakers to the room, which was awesome and made them sound that much better in here. But still, I had to get a feel for the new calibration, the new environment, and that was just a matter of sitting there and putting my Spotify mix references playlist that I made of like mixes that sound really great. We've talked about this before.
Yes.
And just listening through a whole ton of that playlist on these speakers and getting to know this room. It's like getting yourself in a place of familiarity so that I know what hit records sound like in this room. So when I go into my actual session and I'm working on something, I know how bright something's supposed to be. I know the way that the punchiness of the drums is going to sound in this space. And it sounds like so detailed to talk about it like that, but it's so true. You have to know your space. And if you can listen to reference tracks and reference mixes that you love, then you're going to get to know the way that those songs sound in your space. Or like Andrew said, whether it's AirPods to headphones to studio monitors, if you know them well, you're going to get better results.
Yes, I completely agree. Another way I really like to do this is while I'm mixing, I'll pull up, we just talked about it, the reference track playlist. As you're mixing, you can kind of go back and forth to make sure that you're using a reference track. Like if you're not using reference tracks now, you definitely need to. But I also use that to just make sure that I'm like resetting the standard for the way things are supposed to sound. And so I just listen to the reference track. I'm like, okay, this is what things sound like right now, right here, right now. And then I can compare that to the mix that I'm currently mixing. Is there too much low end in my mix? Is there not enough low end in my mix? And then back and forth. And I do that a lot. I go back between Spotify and my mix probably, I mean, I'd say a dozen times like per mixing session. I do that a ton. I might rely on it a little too much, but I love it.
No, it's like we were talking about sushi before we jumped on this call. You're not the biggest fan. I'm a huge fan. It's totally cool. But one thing you do with sushi is like they have the wasabi there, which is the extra spicy, super spicy element of kind of paste made out of, I don't know, is it like horseradish or something? And between different types of sushi, you're supposed to like take a little hit of this wasabi to cleanse your palate. And that's kind of what checking back and forth with reference mixes is doing. You're cleansing your palate. So all that bias of you sitting there for 45 minutes and kind of being biased by maybe your room or you worked on your bass guitar too long and you've blown out your ears. Like you have to, you keep cleansing the palate, coming back to the reference mixes. I love to every single morning just prime my day with like getting in the state of what good music sounds like. So I will just put on that mix playlist, listen to like 5 or 6 songs, and then get to work.
I love that. I'm going to start calling my reference track playlist Wasabi.
Yeah. The wasabi, the cleanser, the primer. All right. What is number 3 of the 6 mistakes, Andrew?
All right, this is a tough one. This is not gain staging properly, and I want to say right off the bat, gain staging is a hot topic right now, and people are like constantly going back and forth on it, whether it matters or not. I'm telling you right now, it matters, but it's not a number; it's a sound. Gain staging is a sound. If it's clipping, that's not good. Like digital clipping. And if it's too quiet, you're not going to get enough signal in there, and you might actually bring up the noise floor, especially if you're dealing with cheaper equipment or really expensive analog equipment. So you have to make sure that you're actually having a good sound at the source. Please don't worry about the specific numbers like -18 to -9 dB. Just worry about the way it sounds. What do you think, Alex?
It's so true. That was very deep and philosophical when you said gain staging. Gain staging is not a number; it's a sound, and it's this whole thing of just understanding. For a long time, I was very confused by gain staging when I was starting out. I was like, "What is gain staging?" I was so afraid to clip anything in my mix, and in the last few years, I've had a lot of these beliefs just broken, and I now just understand gain staging is so simple. It's just about leaving enough headroom in your mix, and as you work, just keeping volume in mind at all times. It's really that simple. There's nothing that scary about it. It's gain staging is just the wisdom to know when I turn up all these tracks, I'm clipping my master fader. And I don't want to do that. So I'm going to turn them down, and I'm going to turn them down a little bit more to leave headroom for when I add in the bass and add in the guitars and add in the vocals. And it's just that wisdom to know a little bit ahead of time that, oh, I need to leave a little bit of extra headroom here on my master fader. And I need, because I know what's coming and I know things are going to get louder, and I can anticipate that stuff ahead of time by gain staging. If you don't gain stage, you're going to get to the end of your mix, and then you're going to be pulling faders down, and then things are going to sound different because they were clipping before and now they're not, and the clip you mixed according to the clipping, and just it's a whole mess. So just if you can learn to gain stage properly and do it based on just the sound, not necessarily freaking out about the numbers, but just keeping in mind, leave some headroom, it's going to do you a whole bunch of good going forward and get you out of the amateur zone and into this professional path very, very quickly. Would you agree, Andrew?
Yeah, I would 1000% agree.
Imagine you're just like, I disagree.
Make it way more interesting.
I was really counting on you. Yeah.
Dude, in the notes you mentioned the trim trick. Like, I want to know what you mean by the trim trick. That seems super interesting.
Yeah. So this is a trick that I don't know where I heard it, but it's really helpful. Lots of engineers, they might kind of, think that this is not necessary. Like, you should just know how to do things right off the bat, but not everyone's there, and that's okay. And what you can do is put a gain plugin on your master fader, just like a clean game. In Pro Tools, we have one called Trim. I know that every single DAW has some way of adding gain, and you're going to put it on your master fader and boost it up about 6 dB, and then do that right at the start of your mix. And then as you work, you're going to be mixing and you're going to be hearing everything louder, so it'll all seem louder to you, and you're not going to be cranking your monitors as much, and the gain staging thing is going to be a lot easier for you, because by turning up your master fader, you're not going to clip it as fast because things are going to sound louder to you. You're going to be working in this kind of louder space that you like, and then at the end of your mix, you can bypass that plugin, and magically you have an extra 6 dB of headroom on your mix.
I love that. I really, really like that a lot. That's cool. I'm gonna have to keep that in my back pocket, especially for when I'm like teaching students and stuff like that.
Yeah, and
that's cool.
It's not something I currently do like every day, but starting out, getting to know headroom, making sure that you're just making good practices in your mix, it can help a ton. But
Yes,
Andrew, what is number 4 of the beginner mistakes that you can make in mixing?
All right, number 4 is working with bad tracks. Now, there's two sides of this, where you are mixing somebody else's stuff, or you're doing your own stuff, and I'm sure maybe you're doing both. I know for a lot of people that I've talked to, and a lot of my students, they're doing their own stuff. But if you're not doing your own stuff, I want to say it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility to get the best result you possibly can out of it. And Alex, I'm gonna push that off to you because you do a lot of this every single day.
Yeah, so I do a lot of mixing in particular, and so I'm always receiving. Lots of times I work with indie artists, and I'm receiving home recorded tracks, and you can really tell a difference when, even if it's home recorded, the engineer knows what they're doing. They have good mic placement. They've set up some treatment or some acoustic treatment around the mic, so they're not getting a ton of reflections. Believe it or not, the recording is a massive, massive part of how the mix turns out. The mix engineer can only do so much with a bad recording. And so getting that recording really clean, really precise, and taking that extra minute or two to hang a blanket, in front of the really reflective surface you're recording next to, it can make a massive difference for your song. And it's very, very worthwhile. So I see this all the time, and sometimes to the point where I need to go back and say, hey, I hear that the vocal track, it sounds like maybe you recorded this in the bathroom. Just thinking of like a reflective space, and just suggesting like, hey, what I would do is maybe set up a little blanket for it or something, and just try and get a little bit less reflections, because when I go to compress that vocal, that compression is going to bring all that reverb that was coming into the mic in not a nice way. It's the reverb that we want gets added later, but not in the raw recording,
Yes.
At least most of the time, unless you're going for something in particular. Andrew, you have so many good techniques about like how to record well. What are like some nuggets of wisdom here, just in terms of working with bad tracks and just getting better tracks instead to get better results?
Yeah, if you're doing stuff yourself, 1000% find a way to get a quiet room. If you can put up acoustic treatment, that's great. If not, no big deal. I have a thing I like to call the pop-up acoustic treatment technique. I just find moving blankets or anything that I can find and just create myself a little box. You could get these things on Amazon for like $15, and they are portable clothing racks that you can, sit in a closet or sit in the corner of a room or something like that. And I got a couple of them, and then I just put moving blankets over top and quilts and anything that I can find. Towels, like bath towels, work really, really well at blocking out sound. And so I just kind of create myself a little vocal room if I can, just like right over top. And then if you only have one, you could just put it next to like a window or any like super reflective spot that is going to be capturing a lot of that sound. Another way is, right, especially if you're using a dynamic microphone. A dynamic has a super cardioid pattern, or just a cardioid pattern, which means it picks up sound right in front and rejects sounds directly behind. So take that mic, find some like super reflective surface, and put the back of the microphone towards that, and then just put one blanket behind you, or a couple of blankets, whatever you can find behind you, so that way any sound that gets reflected back and then towards the microphone doesn't get captured. If you have a closet, that's like the best way I've ever found at having like your own personal vocal booth. But besides that, those are the ways that I like to make sure that I'm getting like really nice, good, clean recordings. For the most part, most people are only recording acoustic guitar and vocals, and that's going to be great for you. If you're doing drums, there's tons of other stuff that we could talk about in some other podcast, but that's like
a whole episode. Yeah.
that's a whole like series, my dude.
So good. So good. It's just getting great recordings off the bat is going to just make for a better mix overall. And it accounts for a lot more of the mix than you think.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. All right. So what is number 5?
Number 5 mistake that beginner mixers make is following rules and not a system. So what do we mean by rules? What would your take on this be, Andrew?
So how I define rules versus a system, because here's the thing. People keep saying there's no rules to audio production. And I agree with that, but if you follow a system, if I literally hand you the tracks that I just got off a mix a little bit ago, if I hand you those tracks and I tell you exactly what to do, you will get the exact result that I got if I give you the exact numbers and exact presets. But here's the thing. I'm not using the exact presets and the exact settings on every single mix. So how I define a rule and a system is, a rule is you need negative 28 dB of your threshold needs to be set at negative 28 dB. And then you need to make sure that you have 3K boosted about like 3.4 dB for the snare. It's like, that's a rule. People have rules, and those are like presets. A system instead is, I like having a roughly negative 3 dB of gain reduction on my first plugin of vocals. How you actually get that changes per vocal, per vocalist, per microphone, the room that they're in. But having a general idea of, I want to be able to tame my peaks just a little bit on that first pass through with my vocals is a system. A system is understanding how the tools work and understanding what you want to do with them, not typing specific numbers into the plugin itself.
Oh man, this actually, it's such a good point, and it makes me think of a story that I can maybe share to hit this home. I remember the first time I ever tried to mix drums, and like, this is a long time ago. It was long before my professional career. And I was trying to figure out, I had decent sounding drum recordings, but I wanted to now mix them and get them sounding great. And so I hopped on YouTube, and like, I distinctly remember doing this. And looking back, it's like, it's so stupid. But I found a video of Graham from the Recording Revolution mixing drums. And in the video, love the YouTube channel, love the guy. Great video, but I interpreted it wrong. In the video, he was using an SSL EQ, and he was showing, okay, on this overhead here, I have, everything boosted at this specific frequency. And he would show exact things, like on the snare at 4K, I boosted 2.5. And so what I did, my first ever time mixing drums, I went and I opened up the same EQ on my snare, and I went to the exact setting that he had, the exact same one, the exact like 4.3 kilohertz, boost 2.5 dB, and I kid you not, I copied every single setting for every single drum from kick through snare, through hats, toms, overheads, and then at the end, I wondered why mine didn't sound as good.
Dude, I swear we had the exact same experience.
And I literally copied it to the decimal point of like the dB. And the reason this doesn't work is because I was looking at this video as if I was learning some type of rule that you always boost, you always do this specific thing. And so when rather there are systems to follow instead of rules, the rule being the exact frequency number and the exact decibel number to boost or duck, that's not going to work because every recording's different, everything's gain stage different mics are used. There are so many different factors. But what I should have realized is that there is a system to mixing drums that was being more or less shown in that video. And that system is general things to know, such as a good practice is to consider brightening up your overheads, which means going into those higher frequencies from 8K, 10K and up and trying to boost those a little until it sounds right to you. Not the exact numbers that you saw in the video, but rather taking the idea of brightening the overheads and then going to the kick and realizing that kind of in that 400 range typically will sound really boxy on a kick, and you may want to consider pulling some of that out, and you're going to have to tweak the settings each time, boosting a little bit of low end on the kick. This is the system. This is the system that works. It's the ideas, but following the exact decimal points of someone else is not going to get you the results. But learning the system, learning the techniques, and this goes for vocals, this goes for drums, it's the system that's going to do the job.
Yep, I completely agree with you. That's why I always say don't follow rules, follow a system, and follow through with that system, and you're going to get great mixes. But you need to understand. It's the part of understanding. It's not just knowing. It's not the knowledge. It's the understanding. So one other thing is when you're taking advice online, if someone says this is the only way, run. Back out of that video, leave.
Red flag.
Yeah, red flag. If they say this is my way, or this is a way, or this is how stick around and see if you actually like the way it sounds. Because one thing is, I'm not scared of making big moves. I will take that 400 hertz on that kick drum, and I will like almost cut it out entirely just to see what it sounds like. I'm not scared of making big moves. I see especially beginners taking little tweaks, 1 to 2 dB here, because they heard a rule on the internet saying that you don't want to boost more than 2 or 3 dB on a digital compressor. That's just not true. That is not true. I cut and boost things at an insane amount all the time. I am not scared of making big moves because if I'm looking for a specific sound. Once again, you're not trusting your eyes here. You need to be trusting your ears. If it sounds good, it is good.
I couldn't have said that better, man. That could almost be its own point, is just don't be afraid to turn the knobs. I say that all the time on my channel, so I love that you brought that up because it totally relates. It's like the system is the general techniques that sound good, and just following those, not being afraid to make the moves you need to make to get the sound you're going for, and stop following like exact numbers or rules, because as soon as you hear that this is the only way, it's going to be a red flag. We got to move on to number 6. What is the number 6 beginner mistake that you can make in mixing?
No, the number 6 mistake is not spending money on education. And look, real quick, I just want to point out, you're going to invest something into learning this craft. You're either going to invest your time or you're going to invest your money. Either way, you're going to invest one of the two, if not both, trying to get the results that you're looking for. And the painful part is you spend whatever you value the least. And most people value time the least. And I'm not saying if you can't afford it, I understand that, and I'm going to I want to like go back and forth real quick on this, because I didn't go to audio school and you did, although I have spent lots of money on courses, and maybe you have as well in that space. I'm genuinely curious to see what you think about it, but I think spending money on education is so key, because not only are you invested in your time, you're invested in your money, and then it just takes it just puts blinders on and allows you to stay completely focused, because you spent money on this. Now you need to learn this, because now you're invested. You are truly taken in and invested on it. What's your take on this, Alex?
Anytime I've ever invested into something financially, I've taken it more serious than the thing I got for free.
Yep.
And as a result, I've actually gotten a result. So yeah, I did go to audio school. I studied in really a really great environment where I got to work on analog gear in a really well-made studio, worked on an SSL console. And because I had paid to study in this way, I took it so seriously. I was like, okay, my money is being spent here. I'm going to make the most I can out of this experience because I'm paying for it. So we had like studio hour blocks, and all the students got 3-hour chunks blocked out in these great studio facilities where we had the SSL console, kind of any mic you can imagine, all the analog gear, like everything you ever wanted to try. And there were time slots going all through the night because power was on 24/7, and we had our key cards to get into these studios. I would literally wait there because I knew that people weren't going to come to their 3 to 6 a.m. shift. It was like unlikely they were going to come because everyone would prefer to sleep. And I'm definitely a big advocate for sleep, but at the time I was in a season where I wanted to maximize my studio time. And so I prioritized that, and I would be there on most weeknights all through the night waiting for that 3 to 6 a.m. studio time to see if anyone showed up. If they didn't, I would jump in there, get an extra. I'd have like over 10 extra hours, over the course of a few days, just finding good times where, or I guess bad times where people weren't willing to take that extra step, but that I was. And as a result, I was able to get the most out of my education. And I got, I like to think, really good at this recording and mixing thing by having that experience. And because I paid for something, I showed up and I was there and I got the results. So it's like, it's half on, a program or a system or a course on delivering the value to you, and then half on you for showing up and taking it seriously. And so for me, by investing into something, I took that very seriously and I got the results out of it because I was willing to get everything I could out of this resource that I had paid for. So whether it's, going to audio school like that or buying a course, it's like Andrew said, it's you're going to save so much time at the, I can't even say the expense of money, at the investment of money, because it really is like time that you get back. Like I've made all the money back that I spent on tuition at audio school, many times over, just because I sped up that whole learning process. I could still be in that learning process now if I didn't just go all in for a few years there, pull some all-nighters where needed and just get the most out of an educational experience. It made all the difference for me. And I know for anyone that is part of a community or has taken some courses and implemented those techniques, it does make a huge difference. I totally agree.
Yep, I agree with you. I did not go to audio school, and I tried to learn this myself. And here's the thing. I spent years figuring this stuff out on my own and was not getting anywhere near the results that I wanted to get. Because at the end of the day, you are not getting the results you want because you aren't learning what you need to learn. It's not the tools. It's what you need to know to get the results you're looking for. Because I could take my stock plugins in any DAW and get a great result with it now. So I didn't value my time a lot, which is sad to me because guess what? I don't get any more time. Money comes and goes. Time does not. It only goes. We don't get any more time. And so I was not getting the results I needed because I wasn't learning what I needed to learn. And so that's when I took my path of education, which was buying courses. And I bought courses and enrolled in communities and paid mentors and did as much as I possibly could on my own for learning. And that's when I was able to collapse years and years and years of experience from all these other people down into just a few short years. I've been doing this for a very long time. I've been making music longer than I would say most people that I know. And so I just loved it so much that I was willing to invest my time, but I wasn't willing to invest my money because I valued my money too much. Once I was able to actually trade some of that for time, I was able to collapse so much time down. And I am so thankful for the mentors that I had and for the courses that I purchased. It was piecemeal. I got a mixing course from the Recording Revolution and Graham, great stuff. And then I paid for a mentor, and then I enrolled in a community, and then I paid for another course on all of this other kind of stuff. And I tried to piecemeal it together myself in ways I'd love to know. This could be a podcast episode in and of itself. Audio school versus no audio school. Either way, you're going to pay for education, whether you pay for that in money or whether you pay for that in time. So pick whatever you value least and run with it.
And we're not saying, we're not telling you to spend thousands right now on courses and stuff. It could be as simple as just buying and reading a book. It actually reminds me, what you said, especially Andrew, of collapsing the time down, reminds me of something from a quote from Tony Robbins, which is, books will turn decades into days. Someone will put their life's learning into a book, which you can read in just a few days and gain all of that knowledge, turn decades into days. And speaking of turning decades into days, that's what this podcast, we hope, is here to do for you. So I think there is a small favor we'd like to ask of our listeners.
Yes. If you liked this episode, leave a review. Screenshot the review and send it to our email, and we will send you a bonus private episode as soon as we see it. I am super pumped about this.
It's going to be a great bonus episode. If you're listening to this, you don't want to miss out on this one. We are giving our all to make this bonus episode one of the things that gets you serious breakthroughs, not just in better sounding music, but also in the mindset that it takes to actually flip the switch and start getting real results. If you feel like you've been kind of stuck in the same haze of I'm not getting the results I want with my music, we have made this episode exactly for you, so you can finally bust through that, break through any beliefs that are holding you back. This episode has actually been in the works we've been developing the concepts for it for like months.
Yes,
like
very,
it's been
very
in
long
the works
time.
for literally months, and it's going to be out within the next week or so. So definitely screenshot that review and send that over to us, and we're going to send you your secret amazing access link to what we have planned is going to be a really, really special episode for you guys.
Yep. So just to make it very, very clear, whether you're on Spotify, whether you're on iTunes, or whether you're listening on Amazon or wherever else you're listening to this, leave a review, send a screenshot to alexandandrewpodcast@gmail.com, and we will send you over that private personal link for you to watch that bonus episode with all the bonus goodies. You're going to love it. I cannot wait for you to check out that episode. Like I said, or like Alex has said, we've been in the works for months on this episode. We promise it delivers.
So hopefully we'll see you guys in there, and we'll also see you on the next podcast.